Have you ever had a week before your period and you feel like something has just been taking over your mind and your body? You're dealing with rage, anxiety. You don't even recognize yourself in the mirror. While some may experience PMS, this is more of a severe form, which is called PMDD. Welcome to the She Say Grow podcast, where we help women recover from chronic burnout. If you're new, I'm your host, Lindsey Christian, holistic burnout and hormone coach, and a woman who has experienced the chaos, the hormonal imbalances, the mental thoughts that are so scary that has you wondering, who am I? And that's why I'm here today, to help any other woman that is dealing with this to understand what's really going on. I'll share my own story, and I'll even share with you the very first steps that you can start taking to stabilize your hormones and your mind. So what is PMDD exactly? PMDD is Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, which is not just a case of bad PMS. It's actually a neuro-hormonal disorder where your brain and body stop communicating smoothly in the 2 weeks after ovulation. So I want to share a little bit about how we're designed to give us a fuller picture. In the midpoint of our cycle, we typically will go through ovulation. After ovulation, that's when the body says, hey, we just released this egg. It may or may not get fertilized, but we don't want to take any risks. Let's support our girl with a natural anti-anxiety hormone. That anti-anxiety hormone is called progesterone. Not only does it help you to feel nice and calm and chill and support the brain, it also supports the first 8 weeks of life. But here's the challenging part. Some women may not always ovulate, or ovulation could be kind of weak, or the quality of the egg may be lower because we could be missing certain key nutrients. But the biggest thing is that the same foods and materials and building blocks that the body uses to create progesterone also uses that to create cortisol. So if you're under a lot of stress, it literally will steal away from that calming hormone, progesterone, which will be throwing everything out of balance. Now here's the other part. So if there's no fertilization, then the body's like, oh, we don't need this progesterone, drop it so we can start the cycle all over again. Well, during that drop, you experience what scientists call progesterone withdrawal. And that withdrawal flips a chemical switch in the brain. So this is why one day you can laugh and plan dinner and feel great, and then the next day you can feel rage, despair, or intrusive thoughts that make you question your sanity. Now, one of the things that I thought was so interesting is when I read the book, The Power of the Female Brain by Dr. Daniel Amen. And he actually captured all of this on brain scans. They studied a woman named Michelle who struggled with violent PMDD episodes. In one of the worst parts of her cycle, she once told her husband to sleep with one eye open while she held a knife to his face. Something that she said later she barely even remembered. And when they scanned her brain that week, the emotional center of her brain was lit up like wildfire, while the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that manages logic and impulse control, had gone completely dim. 11 days later, they rescanned her, and all of what was lit up had cooled down, and her brain looked stable, balanced, and rational again. That's how drastic the shift can be. Your brain is literally reacting to hormone withdrawal and nervous system overload. And then when you add burnout on top of it, when cortisol is actually stealing the raw materials that your body uses to make progesterone, you end up in a vicious cycle of only running on survival chemistry. And while all of this can sound really interesting, this is what women are going through. And I think the scariest part about PMDD is the life that's being created. I've spoken to so many teens and young women in their early 20s that struggle with PMDD and how they contemplate not even wanting to be on this planet anymore because it feels that severe and it is terrifying for their families. Or moms that are experiencing PMDD, which they're under so much chronic stress anyway, having their children witnessing their mom like that, and they don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on as a mom if you have experienced this, or how it can make you feel like you can't even be in a relationship or you have to isolate and hide yourself. That's the scariest part to me about PMDD that nobody really talks about. Just the isolation part of it. So that's why I created the community, the Pleasure Wire, for women to actually have that safe space to be able to share what's going on, to feel understood, that they are not crazy, and that they can get that 360-degree hormonal support to finally take care of what's going on deep inside naturally. Now, of course, this is not to disregard any kind of medication or any medical help that you're getting taken care of, because I think that everyone should be able to use what works, right? But I think we owe it to ourselves and to our lives to give our bodies a chance by seeing what could be possible by fully supporting our bodies, minds, and emotions. So if you are looking for that support and community, click the link below. So I want to dive in a little bit more to the deep misunderstanding of PMDD. To really grasp how long women have been misunderstood, we have to look way, way back. The story of women's hormones being seen as dangerous did not start with the term PMDD. It was one single word: hysteria. The word hysteria comes from the Greek word hystera, which means uterus. And ancient physicians believed that the womb could literally wander around a woman's body, pressing on her organs and making her crazy. So they called it the wandering womb. If a woman cried too much, or she fainted, or she spoke out of turn, they said that her uterus was misbehaving. Hysteria. When I said that, what came to mind? Crazy, manic, hysterical, right? But that's actually the origin of where that word comes from. So let's fast forward a few centuries. And now the language has evolved a little bit, but the thinking, the mindset didn't. In the 1800s, doctors diagnosed women with things called uterine dementia and menstrual psychosis. And the treatment was marriage, pregnancy, because that's when your body's going to produce more of that progesterone to keep you calm, confinement, and eventually surgery, which would be hysterectomies, meaning the removal of the uterus. Back then, some physicians believed that taking out the womb could, quote unquote, cure hysteria. Can you imagine that they thought cutting out the seed of creation in your body would make a woman sane again? But this misunderstanding goes even deeper and darker. Centuries before the term hysteria, women who had experienced seizures or mood swings, or maybe they even spoke in tongues during their cycle, were called witches. In medieval Europe, these women were persecuted, burned, drowned, or exiled, not because they were evil, but because their bodies behaved in ways that men could not explain. So just think about that for a moment. A woman is trembling and shouting and crying under the influence of her hormones, which would look terrifying to a society that feared women's power. And many of these so-called possessed women likely had PMDD or epilepsy, or were going through perimenopause, or even going through extreme shifts in postpartum depression. They didn't need an exorcism. They needed nourishment, rest, and understanding. And that fear is then carried forward. Even in the early 1900s, when a woman spoke up with emotion, she was called hysterical. Doctors wrote her off as being unstable or unfit or too sensitive, never realizing that her brain was actually responding to a chemical imbalance that can be seen on a scan. And then we move into the 1980s. Two tragic cases that forced the world to pay attention. Christine English, a young British woman, was accused of killing her boyfriend after an argument by running him over during a violent premenstrual episode. In court, psychiatrists testified that she suffered from extreme premenstrual tension, which is what we know as PMDD, for about 14 or 15 years. The judge accepted that her mental state was biologically impaired and reduced the charge from murder to manslaughter. Around the same time, Sandy Craddock stabbed a co-worker to death during a similar premenstrual psychotic episode. And again, medical experts testified, and she too was found guilty of manslaughter instead of murder. These were not victories. These were tragedies. These women's lives could have been saved had someone taken a holistic approach to understanding what's really going on with them and providing them with the support and the nourishment that their bodies and hormones actually needed to function. But for the first time, a court had acknowledged that hormones could drastically alter brain chemistry and behavior. And it took centuries and countless misunderstood women for society to admit what we've always known, that our emotions are physiological, that our cycles are not curses, they are communication. And the fact that you and I are even sitting here listening to me right now means that we're part of the healing of that history, reclaiming what has been punished and silenced for generations. And this is why so many women are carrying so much shame and fear to even admit what they're really feeling, what they're really thinking, because it terrifies them, because they don't even understand what's going on. So now let's talk about, why does this happen? What are the root causes? PMDD is not just one thing. It's a combination of chemistry, stress, sensitivity, and survival. For many women, it's going to start with low or unstable progesterone. Next is some women that may have actually had a history of a brain injury or a concussion, even something that had happened years ago. In that book, The Power of the Female Brain, Dr. Amen's research shows that old injuries can make certain brain regions, especially the emotional portion of the brain and the critical thinking portion of the brain, very hyperreactive to hormonal shifts. When estrogen and progesterone fluctuate, those areas are already very sensitive, light up like a storm. Next is going to be serotonin and dopamine, which most of us have heard of, which is going to be your feel-good hormones. But serotonin is primarily made in your gut. So this is why it's very common for women who have really bad gut health or IBS to struggle with having enough serotonin to feel calm. And dopamine is there to help motivate you. And progesterone and estrogen regulate the enzymes that actually make those neurotransmitters. So when those hormones drop, so do your serotonin and your dopamine. And then you suddenly lose the feeling of joy, patience, and focus. Add to that, nervous system dysregulation. When your body lives in a state of fight or flight for too long, your vagus nerve stops sending this all is well, everything is okay signal to your brain. So even tiny hormone dips start to feel like danger in the body. Not only do we have these hormonal shifts that all women are going through, if women have ADHD, bipolar disorder, or even schizophrenia, those hormonal swings are even more intense and more distorted. For instance, women with ADHD already struggle to have enough dopamine. Women that are dealing with bipolar disorder already struggle with mood stability. And women with schizophrenia already struggle to decipher between their own thoughts and hearing them from an outside source, making them believe that something outside of them is controlling them. So PMDD can look like a mental health relapse, But really, it's just a hormonal storm that is turning the volume all the way up. The pattern underneath all of this is sensitivity. There's nothing wrong with your brain. It's just very responsive. It notices every little chemical change, every stress cue, and every signal for safety or danger. And that's why nervous system work is truly the foundation of hormone healing. And inside the Pleasure Wire, this is exactly what we focus on first, which is teaching your body to feel safe again. Because if your body doesn't feel safe, then your hormones are not going to be stabilized. But now I want to dive in a little bit deeper, and I want to talk about something that most women are terrified to talk about, which are going to be those dark, intrusive thoughts that make you question, okay, am I psycho? You might see a kitchen knife and suddenly picture something awful. And then the guilt hits. Why would I think that? What is wrong with me? I want you to hear this. Those thoughts do not mean that you want to hurt anyone. They are not your true self. And here's what's really happening inside. Your amygdala, which is the fear portion of your brain, is firing off like an alarm. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part that says, it's just a thought, it's not reality. Remember, that goes dark. And because progesterone and serotonin are lower, the brakes on your brain are not working. So the thought that flashes through like a nightmare while you're awake is chemistry, not your character. So as your hormones and your nervous system stabilize, those intrusive images will fade and lose their power. So don't get too wrapped up into them. Don't focus on them too much. You're okay. And I know probably so many of us, if you are used to dealing with this, you probably know, okay, if I can just make it a few more days, this will all be over. But who wants to go through that? Who wants to feel like they have to hide in a cave for a week or 2 weeks because they're terrified of their own mind because of their hormones? So that's why in my community, we talk through these moments openly. No judgment, no stigma, because they're one of the clearest signs that your brain is begging for safety, not punishment. We've talked a lot about science and history for a moment. I just want to connect with you deeper, and I want to share with you my story of what I've experienced. I'm going to share one story, and that was the story of when I experienced rage. And I am not a rageful person. I'm not an angry person. But during this time, I was in a very toxic relationship, and I had recognized the patterns that every time my cycle would come up, there would always be a really bad argument. Well, during this time, it was probably a day or two before my next cycle, and he started to pitch a fight with me. And I had been through a lot in that relationship. I remember I had so much pent up emotions. I was just trying to survive, honestly, and get through that breakup so that I could move out. And he just kept picking at me and picking at me and picking at me and egging me on. And I remember that I just lost it, and I just screamed to the top of my lungs. And I held my fist so tightly. I could only imagine. I'm sure it looked so scary, but I just said, I hate you. And I just felt every emotion that I had ever felt for the 3 years of that relationship in that one moment. And he looked at me and he was like, you are a monster. And I remember to this day that I looked down at my hands around my fists, and those veins, those blood vessels around those areas had burst. That's how intense my anger was. Now, rest assured, I have left that relationship a long, over a decade ago. Now, being able to look back at that, I can say, I was obviously under a ton of stress. My job was mildly stressful, but I was living in a very stressful environment. I was sleeping on the floor for a little bit because we were in 2 separate rooms. And besides that, I recognized that there was also another time where The stress had gotten really bad with work. I recognized that, yes, my hormones were shifting and I felt like things were so heavy. Like I really couldn't even handle stress. Only thing that gave me hope was that I knew that my cycle would start in a few days and it would all be over. And the moment that my period started, I felt fine, normal. I felt like a film had been removed and I could get back to my life. And it was really scary because the thoughts I would have were so dark that I really felt like, all right, God, help me out here. I'm struggling. Like, how do I manage this, It wasn't until I became certified as a menstrual cycle coach and studied and researched hormones that I'm like, okay, I finally understand what's going on. I learned all this stuff about nourishing my hormones and taking care of my body and doing all these things. Let's see if it really works. And within a couple of months, all of those symptoms completely disappeared. Not only the painful cramping that I was very used to, but it was so weird to not experience feeling any kind of mood change before my cycle. At most, I felt a little sleepy, like I wanted to curl up and maybe watch a little Maury and eat some pizza. But what a wild difference compared to having the darkest of dark thoughts, when I knew the right nutrients that my body was needing that I wasn't really aware of. Thought that I was eating the right things, but I was missing so many key nutrients. To this day, I no longer deal with any PMS symptoms. And this has all been done naturally, no birth control, no antidepressants, no medication, all natural. And I've experienced just about every hormonal imbalance you could probably think of. That's a little bit about my story. So let's talk about the system failure for women and the misdiagnosis that often happens. The hardest part for most women with PMDD is not just the symptoms, it's how the system treats us when we reach out for help. I can't tell you how many women I've spoken to who have gone to their doctor and were told, oh, it's just PMS, or it's normal. Or worse, maybe you're just stressed, maybe you're going through depression, or maybe you're bipolar. And so many women, of course, just take that as that belief because we give doctors a lot of authority. And because you're in a dark luteal fog, it's easy to think that something is just fundamentally wrong with you. But here's the truth. I think doctors are great. I think they can help us out a lot. But most doctors were not taught how hormones actually talk to the brain. Endocrinologists study hormones, but they rarely track cycles. Gynecologists study the reproductive system, but are not trained in neurochemistry or trauma. And most doctors have a very short amount of time throughout their study of how nutrition impacts the body, let alone how nutrition impacts the hormones. So women just get passed back and forth with prescriptions here, birth control there, and no one ever really connects the dots. Birth control becomes this default answer. To be honest, for a lot of doctors, I actually get it because they don't have the amount of time to really sit and build that strong rapport with you on what's going on a regular daily basis and to look at things holistically. So they study medicine because they know that is going to get a result with those symptoms, even though there are side effects. They're going to look at blood work, and unfortunately, the blood work can say normal, even though you know for sure you're not normal. On top of that, let's be honest. Most people are going to just say, give me the quick fix. So at that point, the doctor only really has the option of giving medication. And because that's the majority of people, unfortunately, everybody's looked at like that. Unless you express that you want a more natural approach, then they may refer you to different specialists or mention to go to more of a functional doctor to be able to look at things holistically. Personally, I think there's a shift happening. I think there's a lot of people that would love to have responsibility and take control over their health and to know the right things to do and to know how to take care of their bodies. They just don't know how. They just don't have the support. I'm one of those people. I want to know how I can take care of my own body. I want that in-tune relationship with my body and to know how to care for it. And if you do too, then the pleasure wire is the absolute perfect space for you. So this is not to say that doctors are bad or they're inefficient, but it means that we do have to take more control with understanding our bodies holistically, because you are a holistic being. You are more than just your body. You are a person. You have so many things that are impacting you that are not going to be able to be seen on a blood work sample. So what we really need is a system that asks, why is your body struggling to feel safe enough to ovulate? A system that starts to see women as rhythmic and cyclical, not broken. We are not like men. Men have the abundance of testosterone, which is the hormone of stability, of foundation, of building consistently every single day. We create life, and that requires a more complex system and a system that fluctuates. And there needs to be more support around that, at least understanding, to not treat us all the same. I want to speak to the women that are in their late 30s, 40s, and early 50s, because this next chapter is where things can start to feel even more unpredictable. Perimenopause. Perimenopause is not menopause. It's the transition, sometimes even 10 years long, where ovulation may become more inconsistent and your hormone levels swing from high to low like a roller coaster. Some months you may ovulate strongly and feel amazing. The next month, ovulation may not happen at all. And when that happens, progesterone doesn't rise enough to keep your brain calm or balance estrogen. That's why so many women in their 40s suddenly develop PMDD-like symptoms that they probably had never experienced before, like rage and insomnia and sadness, the anxiety that feels like it comes out of nowhere. In this stage, the brain becomes even more sensitive to those estrogen swings. Add in having a midlife crisis, right? Caring for kids, aging parents, pressure from work, experiencing burnout. Those adrenal glands are already getting drained, which would support you with the additional estrogen. So the body tries to make hormones from a lot of backup systems, but it literally cannot be able to keep up. So this becomes a danger zone, not because something's wrong, but because it's the moment many women give up and assume that, I guess I'm just getting older. But this is actually the perfect time to heal, to start supporting your body even deeper, supporting your gut, your adrenals, your liver. And when you nourish ovulation, even if it's irregular, you will learn how to soothe your nervous system and transition into menopause peacefully, not chaotic. Just because you're going through perimenopause, it's just the time of the transition. It doesn't mean you actually have to experience all of these symptoms when you know how to nourish your body. And with everything that's going on in the world, it's no wonder why all of our adrenal glands are just going haywire. So after everything we've covered, the science, the stories, the history, let's talk about what you can start to do right now to start finding relief. Healing PMDD is not about perfection or restriction. It's about rebuilding safety back inside your body. Because when your body feels safe, that's when your hormones start working again. So number one, start to track your rhythm. This is not to see when your period's going to start so you can plan your next vacation. This is really to see how your mood, energy, and focus change throughout the month. Write down the days that you feel most anxious, most tired, and most at peace. That pattern is going to become your map. Proof that what you're feeling has a pattern. It is not random. Step 2 is going to be to stabilize your blood sugar. Make sure that you're eating breakfast with protein and healthy fat. Keep your snacks simple and grounding, maybe having some fruit with nuts, eggs, or smoothies. Steady blood sugar will steady your brain and stabilize things for you. Step 3 is to support your nervous system daily. Practice those slow breaths. Get some sunlight, gentle stretching, journaling. Remove anything that is triggering that anxious energy. Don't think that because at one point you can handle it and it wasn't a big deal, 5 or 10 years ago, you're going through a major change. And if those adrenal glands, which would give you that extra buffer to support your hormones, are impacted from all that stress, it's only causing more harm. Make sure that you're getting plenty of magnesium and zinc and vitamin B6 to support your calming chemistry. And so while these are simple, powerful foundations, they really do work best when you have a community. And so that's why inside the Pleasure Wire, we build those steps in your life month by month. We connect the dots between your cycle, nervous system, and emotion, so you stop feeling like you have to start over or hide every single month. You'll be able to access pampering rituals, recipes, and resets that rebuild your hormones naturally, while being surrounded by women who actually get it. So if you have been listening to this so far, if you made it all the way to the end and wondering why no one has ever told you this before, I want you to know something, that despite what we've been told, you are not hysterical, you are cyclical. The moods, the rage, the heaviness, the intrusive thoughts, those were never your fault. Those were messages from your body trying to find safety in a world that keeps asking her to push past her limits. So for the women who were once burned as witches, locked away as hysterical, they paved a way for us to finally understand ourselves. And now you get to rewrite that story. So I want you to thank yourself so much for tuning in today. Thank you for showing up for yourself. Be sure to follow and subscribe, because up next, we're actually going to have a guest speaker who's going to share her own personal journey with her cycle and what she does spiritually during her menstrual phases. Thank you for tuning in to She Sacral Podcast.